I'm going to be your moderator for the next session, and I have the distinct pleasure of starting out with Nancy Kraft as our first speaker. Nancy is the head of preservation and conservation at the University of Iowa, with the libraries there. In 2009, she received the Midwest Archives Conference President's Award for her extraordinary work following the historic levels of flooding that we all know struck Iowa in the summer of 2008. In 2010, she began teaching for Ocean Teacher, a training program for international oceanographic data information exchange centers around the world. And in February 2012, she visited the Vietnam Institute of Oceanography, Nha Trang, I hope I pronounced that right, as a preservation consultant. So I'm pleased to welcome Nancy. We hope that you will save your questions until the end of the session, after both speakers have spoken. So, Nancy?
Good afternoon, and I hope you didn't have too much sugar, or maybe enough to keep you awake through this session would be good. As I was just introduced, I have been working with what we call IODE, which is a part of UNESCO, and it deals primarily with marine research and development. And it monitors the ocean conditions to improve weather forecasts, predict the onset of El Nino, and provide early warnings of tsunami and storm surges. And I find it just a tad ironic that someone from South Dakota, who is pretty much water deprived, is working with agencies that are have abundance of water. The network is with over 80 countries, and the group that I've been working with primarily are ones from emerging economies, although of course there are the very firmly established economies a part of this group. So the challenge for me is when I go and teach or work with these groups is to think about the building structures that they're in, the limited erratic connectivity and electricity and internet that they have, the fact that they are near an abundance of water. Some of these institutions, libraries and labs are just a few feet from the ocean. They're on islands along rivers. They may or may not have administrative support. Of course, the resources are limited, and a lot of times it lacks government stability. And here's just I've got just three sort of quick overviews here. The Ukraine, the building was built by the military with as cheap and as crude of materials as possible, so the building is falling apart. You can see that the bookcases are questionable. They've got braces across the top in wood. And so these are some of the conditions that when I teach that we need to talk about, and how can we improve or stabilize the situation that they're in. This is Peru. It looks pretty good, but it's near the ocean, and fog rolls in morning and evening, and so they have huge moisture problems. Bolivia has bulletproof windows because of riots. So this is just, and this is just a sampling of the students that I deal with when I'm teaching over with Ocean Academy. So some of the strategies that IODE is using out of their project office that's in Austin, Belgium, is teaching through their academy, providing their resources, on-site consultations, which are called missions because we're working through the UN, email consultation, and then blended learning. The things I keep in mind when I'm teaching is that English is second, third, fourth language, or pretend like they know English. That's also a challenge. So the PowerPoints need to be text heavy. I try to get the students involved early, at least 4 to 6 weeks before the class. And the way I do that is I have them bring photos, digital images of their in their library. And for the disaster response, I teach 2 classes. One's on disaster planning and response, and one's on preservation planning. And for the disaster response, I tell them that I want specific images of their institution, different shots, and the same with preservation. And then when they come to class, then they use those images throughout the week on assignments. And that way, we teach each other, and I can, by looking at their images, also offer some suggestions for ways to improve. And then all of you that teach, this is not a surprise. What I use is a combination of lecture, PowerPoint, videos, group discussion, show and tell, hands-on exercises, tour, and a final project. And the final project is something that they can take back. One of the final projects is with the disaster response. Most of you probably know about D-Plan or D-Plan Lite through NEDCC. And what I've worked with NEDCC, and what the students do is they sign up for this, but you can only do it if you have a U.S. address. So we've got some really strange addresses where it might have Ukraine, but then it'll have Iowa 52242, so that they can register. So we have to do a few workarounds. And then for the preservation one, they do a preservation plan that then they can take back to their administration. I try very hard to be practical in solutions and costs. And for the hands-on supplies, we try really hard to find what we can through just regular sources so that we can direct them to sewing centers or hardware stores rather than relying on our archival supplies, although there are some things that that's your only source. The other thing that I do is you're probably familiar with the Gaylord Guide to Collections Care. And what Gaylord's been very helpful with is I just say how many of these I need and what kind of supplies, and some I end up paying for and some they give me free. But what the best thing of all is they ship it over, so I don't have to lug it around. So I've learned also to have as much stuff shipped ahead, and I also give Belgium, the project office, a list and have them find as many things. And my show and tell mostly are in miniatures. This has been my guiding light that I've used. I work a lot with Iowa institutions, museums, small museums, and local historical societies who are in limited budgets, may or may not have air conditioning, climate control. And when I worked for the State Historical Society, I found these 2 volumes, one in 2 different locations within the State Historical Society. And these are from 1877. And you can see that one is, one's in very good condition and one is very poor. Well, the good condition one, if you think about this, it was without air conditioning for 100 years and it's still doing fairly well. That's because before air conditioning came along, we ventilated our buildings, and we had an excellent way of really some good, simple techniques for climate control without air conditioning. The lower one didn't bother with any kind of care at all, and its building was regulated year-round by keeping the windows open. And so I try to keep that, plus there's a tutorial that John Dean's done for Southeast Asian. I think I've got the site at the end. And I keep that in mind while I'm working with the students, that, you know, life isn't over if you don't have air conditioning. So here's the Ocean Teacher Academy. And we do on-site visits, and this past year we were really lucky that the National Archives in Bruges was going from an old building to a new building. So we were able to get a hard hat tour. First see the old building and all the problems they had, and then tour of this building, and learned of techniques that they were using, such as extra thick walls for fire barriers, things that could probably be used back, hopefully in some of their communities, that still is relying on simple technology. I was a little reluctant to use group discussions because of the language barriers, but those have really turned out to be a lot of fun and rewarding. Don't know how many of you know my aunt's Thanksgiving dinner exercise. That's one I use for disaster response. But I give them something to work around and then report back, and it's a very effective tool. And then the hands-on, of course, is another excellent way of teaching. And the students receive they receive all the PowerPoints and handouts on a CD, because even though all these are posted online, remember, not all of them always have access to the internet. And they don't have a lot of luggage space, so they don't hand them a lot of paper. But this is just one of the hands-on sessions where we always do demonstration, which you can see. Oh, this is one where we're showing how to dry a wet book. And then we have the students do it afterwards. Sometimes we just do demonstration, but we try as much as we can to give them the lecture, the hands-on, or the lecture, the demo, and then the hands-on. And we also have a lot of fun and a lot of humor. And the humor, you, of course, have to be careful because there's language barriers. So you try to do humor in a way that translates across languages. And if you look up, don't know if I can get this to work. There. Okay, here is that's fish. Fish guts. The staff there are really good about helping me set up our hands-on, and for the disaster response, our final is a disaster response, simulated situation. And one of the staff said, well, the fish market they've got guts out there, and I'm going to put them in with your books so it's more real. I said, you're not going to do that. And we go out there, and there are the fish guts. So we had not just dirt to work around. And then the other thing is I run around and act as the paparazzi and ask them all kinds of invasive questions to give them a little flavor of the looky-loos that usually come around. But they had a lot of fun with the fish, which is a good thing because I wasn't so sure about that one. So that gives you a little idea of the teaching in Belgium at Ostend. The on-site consultation, I've just done one, and it's very interesting because it's called a mission, because it's with the UN, and I had to take online classes for safety, and I know how many trucks should be in a convoy now if you're evacuating. And I also know how to spot buried bombs. But, so thankfully in Vietnam I didn't need to know any of those things. But on the consultation, you've got the same kinds of things to remember: the language, the cultural barrier, practical solutions. I always try to say everything positive that I can, and I talk about short and long-term solutions. I ask if the suggestion is doable, and I take lots of photos and notes. And I'll just give you a little quick tour of the visit I had. This is the front of their building, and it's just a few feet from the ocean. And they've had some trouble with, they get monsoons, and they've had some trouble with water flowing into the library. They've done some retrenching, so hopefully they've solved that. They do have really good cross ventilation, but, because they got a window on each side, but they've got pollutants coming in through the windows all day. Most of it's coming from the ships that are coming into the shipyards. It's just a few feet away. So a solution I suggested to them is they need those windows open for the ventilation. So I've suggested that a very simple thing, that they put a sheer fabric, like a curtain over the window, and then clean it regularly to cut down on the pollution. They clean every single book once a month, and within days it's all full of dirt again. So hopefully this will be something that will cut down on that. An extreme would be to put fabric over every single book stack, but I don't think that's very practical. Common problems. When I saw this woman was in my first class I taught in Belgium, and when she showed me this slide, I said, "Oh, you have leaks from your roof." She said, "No, that's termite damage." So we have that here too, but they've got it a little more in the extreme. They are now on a program for termites, so they get regular treatments. And they also have rodent and insect problems. The blue, where the edges look like maybe they've been worn away from sliding on and off the shelf, is actually nibbles from mice. And the hole in the book is from termites. They do have a really deep, high ceiling, and one of the things I noticed in the rooms was they had these air conditioners put in, and they said, "Oh yeah, the Brits put them in, but we can't afford to run them." Because their electricity is really expensive. They're now to a situation where they have continuous electricity. They used to have rollouts. And so I asked them if they could afford to have drop-down, ceiling fans, and could afford to run those. And they said, "Oh yeah, sure." So one of the solutions that I've recommended is they get fans in place. Mostly with the cross ventilation, it's got really good circulation, but there's one area that's right here that's really, really dead. And so I recommended that they do a simple solution there. And we also talked, this is real typical of exhibit displays. I've seen a lot of pictures from different countries. And so we talk in our class, and I talked on site about some better practices for exhibits. And they have microfiche stored in the hottest part of the building and no microfiche reader. And one of the things that we're trying to decide on this particular one is these are the microfiche from different articles, but it's all on one topic, and to recreate that collection would be, I think, very difficult, even though probably all the issues are digitized or preserved somehow. But I've recommended that they still keep them until we can figure out a way to capture before they destroy. And then I also gave them some ideas of how to be able to, through the internet, of how they might be able to read them on site if they need to. They have storage issues. You saw the Ukraine, they have severe storage issues. The one in Vietnam isn't too bad. It's more, I think, typical of the ones that we have here, except that they're stored in wood, and so you're having additional problems. But they've got the overcrowding, the things hanging off shelves that aren't the right size, and things, the maps are a real problem. So we talked about some ways that they could deal with that. And I also I encourage the students to share innovative, inexpensive ways that they've come up with that protect their materials. And here they used an old poster and flipped it over, and the poster on the white side is very stable. It's not causing any harm to the map. And she made corners. You can see, to hold the map in place. And the map's very, very fragile, and it's heavily used. So this is something that she's come up with, that it's allowing them to safely use the map. The rear book storage is in the hardest part of the building without any air conditioning, air circulation, and you can see that the ceiling's really low. So I asked the management there if it would be all right to include in the report a recommendation that for long-term that they find a place within their facility, a room where they could hopefully provide air conditioning and some dehumidification. And they said that for long-term that would be something that they'd be very comfortable with. One of our main reasons with going over there is they do have some rare books. As determined by Linda Picula, who's with NOAA in the United States and is a coordinator for this, for the training and ocean teacher. And a lot of these you can't find them anywhere or on any of the online, like OCLC and other databases, or they're held in one place. And so we went over to see if there's something we could do, at least temporarily, for them, and we're also trying to come up with inexpensive ways of getting them digitized and without shipping them out of country. What we did was, I think I have a slide out of place. What we did was we measured them, and then I took the measurements back, and I'm going to give you some statistics here. This is Linda Lundy in our lab here back in Iowa. And one of the speakers talked about using assembly line. Well, they probably didn't use the word assembly line, but batching items through the conservation lab. And Linda has come up with batching. And I don't know if you can, let's see, right there. She's done all the forms first before she's done any covering or anything. And she'll do 14 boxes at a time, and she can do them in 20 hours. So she can do fabric-covered, custom-made boxes, 1.5 hours per box. And those of you that make boxes know that that's a significant cut in time. This is where I have it out of order. This is the upper is where we're measuring the books, and we had to measure in several different places because the book is a little bit distorted. And then the other pictures are the boxes that we made being shipped back to them. And I was a nervous wreck before they contacted me because I was just I was scared to death that I had done incorrect measurements, and I had a nightmare that none of the boxes fit. But here's proof that they did, and I unwittingly, I did not know that this is, I believe, their 90th anniversary as a library. The boxes came the month that they were celebrating that anniversary, so that was a nice little bonus. To try to digitize these books, it's, I think, fairly common now that the emerging economies, everyone has a cell phone. They, in some ways, are tech smart, but in other ways, they're tech poor. So they have limited scanning abilities, equipment, server space. And so we're trying to figure out how we can provide, scan and digitize these materials that are very at risk because they're very unique. And so what we're proposing is that we do the old method of camera copy, only with digital. And we did a little test in Iowa with a Nikon D300. And we captured it high resolution uncompressed TIFF. And we ran it through an OCR, Abby Fine. And it had very high capture rate, very high resolution rate. So what we're thinking of doing is, what I'm hoping is I can maybe find a student at the university or within the area who's from Vietnam that can work for us and learn about digitizing, that we can set them up with this camera stand and send them back to Vietnam to do the training. And then that they would drop the images in a Dropbox to us. We would do the image processing for them and then dump them into HathiTrust. So that's where we're hoping we'll see. We've tested it out, so proof of concept, but we'll see if the reality works. After the course, what I've done is disaster response through email. We also did some blended learning where a group in Fiji took, and I'm going to show you a video clip here in just a second, where they watched 2 of the sessions that had been recorded and then composed questions to me and mailed them to me, and then we had a live chat. The challenge was to match up the 2 days. So in Fiji, it was in the next morning. Me, it was the previous evening, and tried to match that. But it worked very well. So I think now I need to escape. Just going to show you just a little clip. Get the right thing here. So this is online, and it's accessible to anyone. A book can go into any kind of freezer, but it won't dry the book. If you go to a freeze dryer through a special company, that will dry your book too. If you leave your book in long enough, it will dry your book. Just like if you leave your ice cubes in the freezer long enough, your ice cube will disappear. It's taking the water out. If your book is regular paper, you can dry every few pages, but if it's that glossy, I'll pass this around, then we'll need to interleaf every single page, because if it dries, before you get it pulled apart, it sticks. And you might be able to get it apart, you might not. But you also notice that this book is crinkling this way, so that's where it's the weakest. And this would be the strongest edge. You need to be very gentle when you pull a book out of the water. If you push too hard, then you could be damaging the pages. But you want, let me show you a little bit. this work, or is this one that you just throw away? On this very important book, no. You see how this, he did just as we said, got all the way up, because this book is very, very wet. But can you see what's happening to the cover? See? See how this is? Sun can age your book, so you don't want to, stay out for a long time. But you get that nice air movement too. So setting outside is also an option. The sheets that you take out, we're going to set them up on a floor or something to dry. So that just gives you a little idea of anyway, that gives you a little idea of the usefulness of hands-on. Every book was different, and the students, by the end of the week, understood that one size, one solution doesn't fit all. These are the sites that I use and refer teachers, the students to, which is the Cornell one I mentioned with John Dean, of Preservation 10 and Preservation 101. And we also have a happy hour celebrating Belgian beer the first evening. And I believe that concludes, and we'll wait until after second session. I just do it straight, guys.